We're going to go ahead and get started today. I'm going to be doing most of the talking. Ryan's a little bit sick, so he'll be muted unless he can't contain himself. But hopefully you'll find this to be a good topic. I'm pretty excited to cover it. It's sort of a hot topic in media, so I'll dig right in. As always, post any questions that you have. We do want to get as much feedback from you as we can. Make sure that we're answering questions, but also clearly articulating what it is that we're covering. So today I suspect there'll be a few questions. All right, we're going to spend some time today talking about banner ads, banner ad theory, talking about why the ads on your site are where they are, talk about what's changing and really where it's going, and also how mobile impacts it. So take some notes. This should be pretty useful stuff for you in terms of understanding why we do what we do. I also want to say, though, this is sort of advanced stuff. And you're going to see that there's some areas where, even with the experts, there's not agreement or there's confusion. And so a lot of what we talk about is for you to understand sort of what's going on, not for you necessarily to take everything that we go through right now and use that in your sales pitch, although clearly at the end some of that will be covered with our solution selling. So let me take just a second and talk about the high level. So when you think of a banner ad, it's a digital version of a print ad. Effectively, it should look different, but it's effectively that. It's a display ad, and it appears alongside some sort of content. Could be articles, could be business information, doesn't matter. It's alongside something. And so the most prominent way that sites sell and charge for display ads on the internet is called cost per thousand impressions, CPM, M being the Roman numeral. So for every 1,000 impressions, the price is X. If you look across the internet on a whole, the average price per 1,000 impressions is something like $2. Show 1,000 ads, get $2. And so it's clearly a numbers game. Now, Google and others use something called cost per click. You as an advertiser will only pay when someone clicks on your ad. It's important to note that this is really great for Google because when I am searching, I am seeking, I have intent. There's a strong correlation between me clicking on a link in Google and potentially buying a product. And so there's good value for the advertisers, and Google makes a ton of money because you do a lot of clicking. You're there literally to click on stuff. For content sites, this is not a great way to sell. That's why we don't encourage it. People go to your site to read content. They're going to discover other things, and that's part of the value of the ads, but they don't have the intent going there to buy new skis. And frankly, unlike Google, there's real brand value in what you do. There's awareness and so forth. And so it doesn't make sense to do a pay-per-click. So if anyone asks, that's why. People come to your site for one reason, they get the benefit of being exposed to ads and so forth. We're going to cover 3 different approaches to showing ads. One that I call a content bumper, one that's more strategic, and it's one that we use, and then some emerging trends, which we're a little bit going in that direction, but I'll talk about why we're not going all the way there. A couple stats that you might find interesting is that the average click-through rate in the United States is 0.1%. Quite literally, on average, across the internet, for every 1,000 ads that are seen, one of them is clicked on. Obviously, some sites have more, some have less. We find that you all, our publishers, have a higher click-through rate. So if you have 3 clicks per 1,000, you're doing 3 times as good as most people. And so that's just an interesting notion. It also means that 999 people see ads but don't click on them, or at least have an opportunity to see them. There's also research that shows 50% of mobile ads, half the clicks, are accidental. And obviously, there's a lot of ads that show up that pop up in your face on mobile, and the X is about the size of a pin, and your finger is not, and so you try to click the X, but you click the ad, and it goes somewhere else and all of that. But point is, mobile is a really hot, really sexy field. A lot is going on, and it is the Wild West to be sure. Also, it's not on here, but mobile CPMs are under $1 across the internet, so you actually get paid less for mobile in your traditional environment. Now, those numbers don't fully apply to you, one, because you have an audience that no one else has. right? When you go out and you talk about targeting, you can target based on demographics and so forth. But when you're talking about helping a local business help a local business reach a local audience that is engaged, there's really not any other ways to do that other than you. I also want to stress, however, that creative matters. If it's a bad ad, it's a bad ad. And if it's a good ad, it will overcome some of these things, just like in print, right? You have advertisers, and they buy an ad, and they give you this horrible piece of creative. And they say, man, print advertising just doesn't work. Really? Is it the print, or is it the terrible ad that no one understands or spends time looking at? So the creative does matter. Okay. With that, I'm going to share a little research that has guided a little bit of what we do. And this is from Google. Now, this research is actually quite dated, but the more recent research strongly correlates to the fact that these are still true, and frankly, I like these graphics, so I use them. What you see on the left is what's called a heat map. When people are looking at their computer screen, where do their eyes actually go? This isn't where does their mouse go. This isn't what's there. This is across all the websites, where do eyes naturally fall? Wouldn't you know it, sort of smack dab in the middle is a good starting point. What this tells us is that all else being equal, what are better or worse places to put things? So you'll notice you got your nav bar. Most sites have a nav bar like that. And so above the nav bar is pretty light. By the way, dark red is the best, white is the least viewed. And as you can imagine, there is something of a top left to lower right because that's how we read in our culture. But above the nav bar, eyes don't really go there a lot. It's one of the reasons traditional leaderboards perform so terribly. People skip them. Now the irony is, which came first? The leaderboard or the eye tracking? Were we conditioned to skip leaderboards, or do we skip the top because we're used to seeing leaderboards there? I don't know the answer to that, but in any case, it's true. And so you'll notice one of the ads that we put is right under the nav bar where there's a pretty high engagement. Now on the right-hand side, I'll skip to that for a minute, is what's the click-through rates based on banner ads and sizes. Now clearly what this little graph does not show us is where on the page did this particular ad size appear, which is clearly relevant, but it's an average, so take it for what it's worth. They sort of put everything against the full banner. That's why it's kind of gray-blue there. The full banner is effectively the same ad size that we use for the inline ad. However, in our layout, you can go much wider than the 468. So many of you have the full 628, which makes it much more impactful. But that's the baseline, and you can see you've got some other ads that have a lower click-through rate, and then you have others that have much, much higher. And so we've adopted the wide skyscraper on the calendar in the directory, very prominent ad, and it fits nicely into the design, right? Because you can't sort of disregard design when you're thinking about ads. You have to combine the two constraints. We also have the medium rectangle, which is in the sidebar. Now, the medium rectangle doesn't perform quite as well as the large rectangle. However, the difference is medium rectangle is 300 pixels wide, large rectangle is 336. Turns out that 36 pixels really does a lot to change the dynamics of the page. And so from an aesthetics perspective and from presenting content, it wasn't worth it for us to make the sidebar that much wider. Now what you can do is you can use our medium rectangle ad slot and sell half-page ads, which is basically 2.5 times taller than normal. We'll talk more about that, but if you really wanted to do it for a premium advertiser, no problem there, and you can see that's the highest performing slot. And so what we did early on is say, well, let's look at these. Let's look at what other leaders are doing, folks like ESPN.com, a major thought leader in media. They don't always do the sexiest new media stuff in terms of some of the things Facebook does, but ESPN.com has making money down to a science, and so we wanted to emulate some of that. They're also a content site where Facebook is a social networking site, and so they were one of the many draws. You can see on the heat map as well different hotspots and so forth. Obviously, as you have loyal readers, as you have people who get used to your site and the content that's on your site, they're going to be different on your site than the average site. But this is just a starting point. So now I'm going to take you and I'm going to show you a website near me here in the Sacramento area called the Natomas Buzz. This is web only, a local news site for the Natomas region. Very good site. gets a lot done for the community. My understanding is that they make a pretty good living. Again, web only, so whether that means 60 or 80 or 100,000, I don't know the answer to, but it's got to be in that ballpark. And I only took a screenshot of sort of where I could capture on my screen. But if you keep scrolling down, you keep seeing more and more ads. And so I refer to this as the content bumper, because if you've ever been bowling, you've got the gutters. And if you have kids, you've probably been bumper bowling. And so it takes the gutters out of play. Now, there's a benefit to this. One, you've got, one or two ad sizes on the left, you've got a small, on the right you've got a large. And so it's a little easier for the creative, and okay, you can be pretty flexible with that. But the other thing that they do that's nice is they can basically say, hey, every ad we sell will appear on every page. Hey, that sounds great. Except, stare at this for a minute. Just look at it closely. Where do your eyes go? What do you see in the peripheral? Do you see the ads, or do you almost get tunnel vision and you go, okay, there's bumpers. I don't even need to let my eyes wander because there's nothing over there that I'm going to really read about. And so this is one reason we're really not a fan of this approach. And you see a lot of online-only news sites take this approach because it's an easier thing to do. And in a way, it's an easier site to say, oh, your ad will appear on every page. That sounds good. But from a practical application standpoint, we didn't think that this was the best way to do it from an aesthetics perspective, as well as from a delivering value to the advertiser perspective. It would be better for an ad to appear slightly less frequently, but get better visibility than it would be to appear everywhere. Now, I'm going to talk about Locable's layout. Again, if you have any questions or feedback, I definitely welcome it. And if anyone has any feedback, especially as you look at this or what I'm going to show you after the Locable side, really love to use that as a discussion point. So with Locable, when we laid out the page, and we've been, accused on occasion of having too many ads, but the approach that we have taken is to try to make sure that there's a limited number of ads that can be viewed at a given time on a given screen. Now, what's on the left is not to scale. So the calendar widget's actually slightly taller than the featured content rotator, and the content area under inline ad 1 is actually a bit taller than it shows. So it's not to scale, but where you see the orange dotted lines is approximately on a normal display where you would see when the page loads above, and then if you were to scroll down to that point, what the next view would be. And you can see in general, you can see 2 or maybe 3 ads at a time, but still the majority of the real estate is designated for content. And so that's a big part of what we wanted, is to have enough ad slots that you could fill them up. And if you incorporate an additional sidebar ad or some business snapshot ads, you can do even more in the sidebar. But we didn't want to overwhelm the reader. We didn't want it to feel like I was looking at an ad site that had some content. We wanted it to be a content site that may have had a few ads. Now, a couple other things you'll notice, though. We try to present the ads within the flow of the content. So when it's done really well, it can feel very natural to the reader. They don't have to look away, and frankly, they won't miss anything. So it's high value for the advertiser. Now, some of the heat map stuff still applies, right? The push down ad at the top is the most valuable. Inline ad and sidebar are next, and they go down the page. Obviously, not everyone scrolls to the very bottom of the page and so forth. And then you've got the wide skyscraper that appears in the calendar and the directory. Some of the mobile updates that we're working on as well will reduce the total number of ad slots that appear on pages for mobile users. So clearly we can't take 7 ads and present them on mobile. It just won't work. So there will be implications there. Now, I'm going to switch and I'm going to talk about IAB, Internet Advertising Bureau. If you're not familiar with them, they have sort of guided and provided some level of sanity to the Internet and banner ads. And so when you look at your screen here, you're going to see some different sorts of ads. I'm going to walk you through this, so definitely pay attention. On the top left is the more traditional. Obviously, they're not going to show us bad ads, but on the top left are the more traditional ads. And you can see we use wide skyscraper and we use the medium rectangle. The others we don't use, but we use the push down. The better area, they've got the super leaderboard. It's very similar to the push down ad we use, just slightly taller, but effectively the same. And then you've got the half page, which again can be used on your site. And then on the right you have the best. there is this new standard emerging called IAB Rising Stars. These are what fall into this best category. Now here's the thing. You have to create really good creative for these to be any good. And they need to be dynamic. They probably need to have video and animation and interactivity. They almost are mini websites within an advertisement. So for instance, the one that you see on the right is actually the film strip. And so some portion of that is visible. If you look at it, you can see sort of the, it looks like it's about, what, 300 by 600 visible, and it extends above and below, and the user can scroll and they can do different things. It's like a brochure in a banner ad. But how many of your advertisers have a terrible website, have bad logos, don't have good photography? They're not going to create these, at least not most of them. And that's why you see BMW as the advertiser here, right? BMW has the creative chops to do it. So you have to balance these things. Likewise, if I show you this one here, it's very similar to the film strip, but instead of it scrolling up and down, when you hover over it, the entire web page slides off the screen, pardon me, and you see what's on the right here. So it gives you a major canvas to work with, but it only makes sense if your advertisers can afford to do it, can afford to do the creative, and until you hit the sort of scale that some of these big sites have, like MSN, you know, it's probably, they're going to spend 20 times more on the creative than they would on actually placing the ad, and that's not great. Now, two rising stars that we're big fans of are also on this page related to mobile. And so, again, mobile has this issue where you can't necessarily put an ad off to the side because there is no side. And so one of the things that are happening is this adhesion piece where it appears down at the bottom. And if you scroll up or down or whatnot, it still appears at the bottom. So it's going to stay above the fold. It's very visible. And while we haven't implemented this yet, because we're getting ready to move to a new ad server once they're ready for us, we'll likely implement the mobile ad here. Very similar in size, by the way, to the inline ads. Likewise, a slightly more dynamic option is this pull ad. So you can pull to expand it up or down. In the collapse form, it will show some branding and a call to action, and then when you expand it, you see a bit more. You don't have to leave the site to interact with it. And so that's one of the major themes, though, is that click-through rate, remember I said it was 0.1%, is becoming much less trusted in terms of being an effective ad. Likewise, things like page views and pages per visit, which is not necessarily related to advertising itself, but related to engagement, are starting to become debated. Well, is someone more engaged if they read an entire article for 5 minutes or if they click on 5 pages for 30 seconds each? How does that translate into value for advertisers, et cetera, et cetera? And so this is a real argument. If you Google website engagement, you'll probably find a lot of these conversations. So the point is we're trying to filter through this for you and present you with the easiest thing to be able to offer. All right, I'm going to talk for just a minute about native, and then we'll switch and talk about selling itself. So native is this finally coalescing ambiguous term. If you're in print, you've probably done native before in the form of advertorial. Web native is a little more broad than that, but let me read to you how it's been defined, although this is probably arguable as well. A method in which the advertiser attempts to gain attention by providing content in the context of the user's experience. Native ad formats match both the form and the function of the user experience on which it was placed. So the great news is when you get native done really well, it's very natural. But it also means that unlike banner ads, which can appear anywhere, native ads vary from site to site. So the first company to really do this very effectively was Google. You do a search, you're presented with results based on the thing you were searching for, and everybody wins. Google made, what, $16 billion last quarter? That's pretty good, but we're not Google, so we have to look at other things. Facebook does suggested posts. So as you're scrolling through your news feed, you'll see paid posts. If you've ever run a social promotion with us, we've actually utilized this to get the word out and paid Facebook as a portion of this. But we are looking at ways to incorporate native, and we've been doing this with some of you. Everything from sponsored articles to sponsored columns to sponsored guides, etc., is a form of native advertising, as is email sponsorships. So, selling digital. Given everything we've talked about, how do we sell? Let me start with how you don't sell. You don't sell by saying, let me talk to you about our traffic and our click-through rates and the number of unique visitors that we have. We don't talk to you about what our CPM is, because none of that matters to the advertiser, right? None of it probably means anything to the advertiser. But even if they're sophisticated, those things don't matter at the beginning. At the beginning, you need to determine that your audience is who the advertiser wants to reach. And so you can come in and say, let me talk to you a little bit about who we reach. Ideally, they're also a reader, right? And once they validate that, yes, I want to reach that audience, then you need to determine their marketing goals. Do you want to get awareness and drive reach, or are you looking for engagement? You're trying to build your authority in terms of we are the experts in whatever your topic is. Once you understand what their goals are, then you're in a position to provide a solution, and you can put together a package they understand. Well, when you buy display ads in print and online, it helps get the word out, tell your story, get in front of people. And when we layer in a social promotion, we leverage social media and the buzz that goes into that and the play that goes into social media. And if you add in a sponsored article series, now you can educate your readers, but also demonstrate what makes you unique. And when they all work together, you're going to have the most success. And then once the advertiser understands the concept and buys into it, then you can discuss pricing and clarify. Stats and pricing really only matter after the sale, after they've been sold. Then you go, okay, now, is this in your budget? What else can I answer for you, etc. So if you lead with pricing and stats, you're going to lose people. This is true anywhere, but especially online. All right, so to wrap up, here are some things that you can sell today of a digital nature. And we did have an article that Ryan put together about 4 months ago, which is on our blog, which is 14 revenue opportunities that publishers have with digital, although I've added 2 at the bottom here in the PowerPoint. So social promotions we love. You drive revenue, you drive audience. Best of contests, reviews contests, blogger contests, all are great for sponsorships. All drive a ton of traffic to your website. Yes, you can sell banner ads. The irony is, of everything on this list, banner ads are perhaps the least interesting because the only thing you get is money. With these other things, you get more content, you get more traffic, you get more engagement. We love local guides. We've talked about that. Special advertising sections are great. Obviously the directory. Yes, we do marketing on the directory, but if you can let people know it exists, you can encourage them to go sign up. Some folks are leveraging the directory in multiple ways, using the insert feature on content, building out guides. Again, it all works together and makes it more valuable. Featured events, we've talked about this previously on a previous session. There's a lot that you can do there. Even couple it with social promotions. Email newsletter sponsorships. If you're not cultivating a newsletter, you're hurting yourself. It's a great way to get people to come back. Newsletters are more valuable than social media to you in terms of driving traffic and reach. So we want to cultivate that, and you can absolutely monetize it. There's some things you can do to sell coupons, to sell deals. Yes, there's technology that you can use that exists, but also there's just things you can do as a position of authority to do that, and of course sponsored articles. Now the 2 at the very bottom are sort of green because you can make good money doing both of these, but it's more about your relationships than it is about your audience. Audience extension, real quick primer, is by going to an advertiser and they say, here's who I want to reach. And you can say, well, we can do all these things with our brand, and there's a bigger network that we can also reach. Now, there's 2 pieces of this. One is Locable. So we had a lead come in a couple weeks ago from a surrogacy, as in pregnancy surrogacy company, and they were trying to reach people sort of in the general Southern California market. And so now we're getting involved to help them place ads and so forth, actually a number of these things on a number of the sites. And so that is literally driving new revenue for other publishers, but also you get a cut when you refer that out. And there's also companies that go even further and say, hey, we work with folks like Car and Driver, and we work with folks like Home and Garden. And if you have someone who's trying to reach a specific demographic that goes well with those sites, and in your market, you can do a buy that's very targeted on one of those sites. Not as targeted as your site, but still quite good. So if you had a local, I don't know, car dealership, it could be a great opportunity for this. It's lower cost, in many ways than what we do within our network. It's limited to banner ads, but for you it's a way to keep all that under your brand, provide a valuable service, and make money in the process because you get an override. So if this sounds interesting to you, it's a little more complicated. I'm not going to spend any more time on it, but talk to us. There's definitely some publishers that can have some success with audience extension that really is super easy. And then, of course, things like web development. So whether you do it yourself or you kick them over to Locable, business owners need things built just like they need ads built. And so if you're not making money from web development, you're really leaving money on the table. And so what all this comes back to is, what's the problem they're trying to solve and how can you solve it? You personally, your brand, your audience, and your relationships. All right, that wraps up what I wanted to cover today regarding banner ad theory and what you can monetize. I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Go ahead and post any that you have.